the talks format and move on to the next part that is watched. That has a different format. It's going to be a more interactive discussion aimed at we're going to be talking about cooperation between analytical organizations in the region in general. And for that, I'd like to invite several of my colleagues who represent analytical organizations from the region. And namely, just let me pull up the cheat sheet here. Batsugar just left, but he is going to be back, he promised. And so we're going to start with Uzbekistan. Bobur Bekmurodov, the chairman of the organization of Yuksalish organization. Then let's move to Tajikistan. Bakozoda, the Zerkalo or Mirror of Research organization. Kyrgyzstan now. Kirillenko, Beyond organization. Nurgul Dzhanaeva, the Women's NGO of Kyrgyzstan, a forum of women's NGOs of Kyrgyzstan, a member of the Global Council of Innovation for Change Network, and from Kyrgyzstan. And I hope that we have Elmira Nugulbayeva that's virtually connected through Zoom, but she was already with us before lunch, but we'll check that. And from Kazakhstan, Gulzhan Alimbekova. And Serek Besimbayev from the Research Center under the Department. And last but not least, from Mongolia, the Independent Research Center from Mongolia, Batsugar. So to start off, I would like to check with my colleagues who are in Zoom. Can you hear us? Can you hear me? Yes, we can. Great. So you can hear and see us. How about English? Can you? Okay, great. Yes, everyone's nodding. That means everything is fine. So that's great. So let's start our discussion. And as I promised, or as I already, but it sounded more like a thread that the format is going to be slightly different. But what we would like to do, is to move away from a lone expert discussion format into a more interactive discussion. And for that, in the beginning of the discussion, I am going to ask you a question as a starter, and I would like to ask you to answer it within 2 minutes. And I will have a mean timer with me, and I will be very insistent on you keeping the time. So we have a couple of minutes to think about the answer. In the meantime, I will try to word my idea as to why we're talking about the regional exchange and why is it of an interest, what our objective in this discussion is, what objective we pursue in this. So I'm a historian by education. I worked on studies of history in Central Asia, and the national borders of states that currently emerged, quite recently emerged. And from this perspective, I am used to looking at Central Asia as a space of a large walk that combines and merges and fuses different cultures, languages, history, and influence. So languages of all the people that you see on the stage right now used to be state languages of some state formation on this territory, for example. So for example, if we are here in this environment where the regional exchange has always been a norm, and that was the natural mode of living of all people in Central Asia. Now national borders occurred, and on one hand they determine the development of the state and society of the current epoch, but on the other hand, sometimes they narrow the view. So if they occur as some kind of walls of discourse and intellectual space where we and our opinions may be limited. And as we already heard today, and the regional exchange between the researchers and research centers is what we need right now. But at the same time, we notice that it doesn't occur by itself. For example, we have a task to form such an environment by our own means that would allow us to talk about a regional exchange of study results. And for that, I would like to ask you questions one by one. For you personally, for you in the work of your organizations, what's the value of this regional exchange? And you can talk on your behalf, say, yes, it is important for me. What's the value of this regional exchange, and how and why you would like to, what you would like to exchange with at the regional level? And let's start going backwards. Let's start from the east, move towards west, and Sabatsugar, over to you. Thank you, Philip. Can I speak English? Sure.
From the personal point of view, or from professional perspective, the regional cooperation, the importance of the regional cooperation is, first of all, the social problems we are facing, they don't know borders. So all the problems we have, for example, people were just talking about this ecological, environmental problems which doesn't know borders. So it is important to, in order to understand and address those issues together, not as a separate group of people. And I think that's the first and foremost important thing why we have to cooperate regionally, if possible, globally. And second things that we can learn a lot from each other, from different perspectives. So we all have this common background, common historical aspects in our region. For example, we are all in the social, economic, and political transition. And we are living this transitional period and problems with that differently. And that means we can have a lot of lessons and experiences, practices to learn from each other. And sharing these experiences with each other helps us to see the problems differently and to come up with resolutions that can be more effective than we are having or implementing right now. So with this mind, we are promoting this regional think tank initiative and hope our colleagues will contribute more perspectives and points on that. Thank you.
Thank you. The Regional Think Tank Initiative will ask you a couple of questions on that as well. But now I would like to move from Mongolia slightly backwards, but towards Kazakhstan. We have two representatives from Kazakhstan, and we heard a man. So I'd like to return the floor over to a woman. Gulzhan, over to you. Thank you. You're a very great strategist, but going back to your question, we do lack this exchange, regional exchange. We're saying regional exchange, but we've been large countries for a long time, and truth is that we're very close to each other, but we're very far away at the same time, because as a result of this large studies that we conducted between countries, we start seeing more of differences between the countries, but on the other hand, we still see a lot of areas for interaction and what needs to be looked into, and what's more important, how the society can benefit from what we do. A lot of regional studies give us the differences in cultures. For example, we're Central Asia, but on the other hand, we have a lot of sensitive areas and sensitive issues, and that's important to understand. And I'd like to thank all the presenters who spoke before me and my colleagues about the studies that they conducted. And I got a feeling right away that there's a lack of information, a lack of exchange of information about the work in each region. We have our own achievements, but we also have some drawbacks or failures or whatever, not even legislation, but due to our legal literacy and so on and so forth. So it would be nice if we could come up with some innovation interactive platform to exchange information and experience. It would be nice to have some panel studies, because then we could speak the same language, discuss different data in different sectors and different areas, and that'll be very productive, which would allow us to conduct to develop different methodologies and approaches given the realities of the present. Sarah, over to you. Do you have any personal opinion on this? this, maybe an area of studies where it would be of a particular value for you. That'd be very interesting to know. Thank you. I'm a sociologist, and I can say that to develop for any community to develop social network and the quality of and social capital is very important. And the cooperation between regional centers is the environment or the platform which can be used for a new generation of think tanks to emerge, and that forms the agenda at the regional level. It doesn't compete for over finances, or is not afraid that somebody is going to steal a methodology from and an idea from somebody else, but is focusing on cooperation. For me, it is important to make sure that this regional cooperation develops towards that goal. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's move further to the west and go to Kyrgyzstan. And here, to start off, I would like to turn the floor to Elmira. Elmira, if you're ready, we have our colleagues, Elmira Nagobaeva from the Police Asia Foundation. She's connected via Zoom. Elmira, over to you. Thank you very much. I think that such a high demand for cross reflection has become very relevant and accurate, and I believe that this deficit is apparent, is very apparent today. And we observe in different areas, for example, issues of security. And I want to recall one study that we did when we tried to access the European Union, the Economic Eurasian Union. I remember when we commissioned this study, we had to present. We got a hold of our colleagues in the region, and in Armenia, and as it turned out, nobody has conducted anything like that. That's impressive, because we accessed it, and of course it was a political decision, but there was no reflexive action, there was no analysis, economic analysis or any other analysis. There was no forecast or prognosis or whatever, and today we have what we have. And here I believe that I think the competition here should be relevant, because we don't have anything to compete in. On the other hand, companies or organizations that commission it can have a say here. For example, if we talk about the power or the government, then it's a slightly different issue, because we'll realize that it's a complex issue. There's competitive politicians and specific players. But if we find this common niche, if we find this general trend, that the same trend that we have to understand. For example, it's important to understand what's going on today. Yes, the dynamics is so high that Elmira, we're losing you, Elmira. How about now? Hello, can you hear us, Elmira? We'll lose you, Elmira. There's a question, there's an issue with the connection. Yes, I can hear. I think it's our regional specific. It's our regional thing. Yes, we know that nothing is easy in the region. Yes, but that happens because we are together analyzing this thing. Should I continue, or can you not hear me? Let's 2 minutes are over, so if you could stay with us, and then I'll be happy to see you during the discussion. Thank you very much. So we stay in Kyrgyzstan, or we move to Kyrgyzstan, rather, that is here in the room with us. So to start off, I'd like to turn the floor to Anna Kirillenko, who represents BIOM organization, and BIOM's work is, BIOM is an environmental organization, but currently it conducts a lot of work on the cross-section between the public and ecological nature. And for organizations with such a profile, what is the motivation for you to deal with regional issues?
It's true, as my colleagues had said, that the world is changing rapidly, and the challenges which we face, including the regional challenges, are quite complex. It's difficult to react to them because very few people know how to respond to the environmental challenges for the society. We need the instruments which we still have to create. And this set of instruments, as Philip managed, it's not only in the sphere of just scientific area, which has to do with the systems and so on, but we try to go into the social spectrum and fields and environment, because we do understand that we're lacking instrumentation, instruments. We need to form the language of sustainable development, of new development, inclusiveness language. And because we do understand that without that, based on the instruments, management instruments, economy management instruments which exist of today, it's practically impossible to resolve existing global issues. And we do understand that without interaction and cooperation, it's also impossible to reach. And the story or the history, of the ecological society has deep roots, but we do understand that just purely ecological society cannot give a definite answer to what to do and how should we act. In terms of the climate change, when the countries were presented COP26, different organizations were united, social, economic, political, and they provided consultation for our government. And without this interaction, which as of today, we cannot say that it doesn't exist, it's non-existent, it does exist, but that gives hope. It's not sufficient, but it does give hope. Thank you very much. Again, last but not least, Nurgul, you're with us. We are working for a year on the regional issues of the exchange between analytical centers from one side, but from the other side, studies between the research institutions and the civil society. For the civil society, organizations of civil society could become researchers of their own environment. In this regard, it would be nice to hear from you, your opinion. What is the value of the regional approach and what we can get in future? Thank you very much, Philip. I will start from my personal motive, which has to do with our issue. So when we lobby international platforms, the collectivity of our region is not heard. The voice of our region is not heard. We do have research, we do have studies, we do have the information, we have organizations which can and do things, but this regional position, it's lacking. So that leads to our organizations not influencing international solutions. We have the right, we have potential to do so, but in spite of what we discussed, civil sector, local organizations, which could actively demonstrate solidarity and collect the data together, should increase the potential of become the owners of their own territories, to manage and collect data and go to the Eurasian Economic Union level to form or influence the right actions and recommendations at different regional levels. And with that, the second personal motive here, I believe, I am sure that the local organizations are the strongest sort of providers of change, but they have to become the owners of changes. When I ask what are the data on the favorable environment, I just get a link to international organizations, so quite known. I will not provide PR for those organizations, but we have to make our organizations visible, important, so they can change their own environment, impacting the environment, global environment. Thank you. Going to the west, would like to hear the voice from Tajikistan. Kakhramon, in your work, in the work of your organization, what is the value and potential value of the regional exchange? If you take historically, our organization is 21 years old, so work for 21 years. So almost 20 years out of the 21, we are interacting with the regional structures. The first one was, so we were included into regional studies of Konrad Adenauer Fund studies. It was for like 3-4 years. We just ran this research program. So what do we get from this? So first of all, that's a joint exchange, professional growth, communication, which allows us to understand what's happening in the region. We're professional, we're growing professionally. Also, technical skills are developing. And the other thing we get is important data for comparative analysis. The data which we receive at the level of the region. It's not just simple data on one country. We see that we compare data. We heard about different platforms, about COVID, about the mortality rates. So altogether, this data are quite interesting. And one of the important outcomes, but not the least one, I would like to mention, it's so-called comparison, which makes us think and recommend some changes into our countries. If Kyrgyzstan is ahead of us on some issues, we can share this and say, look, the situation was the same in Kyrgyzstan, we're the same country, why don't we have this? And the same thing, Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. So we consider, so the population, we consider it as one region. So this comparison can actually make us thinking and acting. So this is how I see it. Thank you. Again, last but not least, Babur, the floor is yours. You're a great diplomat, and you will find the right words to move this discussion to the right direction. This is how I see it. First of all, that's clear, and it's necessary. It's inexpensive, and it's working. You know. So what does it mean? It's understandable. Whenever we invite experts from Europe or China or US, they have to get to understand the context. But when we invite the expert for analytical institution from Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, it doesn't take long for them to learn. It's quite clear, and it's needed, it's necessary. A lot of answers are in the region. For example, the colleagues from the previous session when we talked about the lack of experts in Afghanistan. In Uzbekistan, we do have these experts. They can rapidly or in timely manner can be utilized and involved in this process. So we do have a demand, and it's available. You know, it's not far. It's local, it's cheaper, it's more efficient and effective to involve our neighbors. And it does work. As I mentioned, there are answers to be found in our region. What works in Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan it's possible they will work with high probability to work in Uzbekistan and vice versa. So based on that, we do understand how valuable international cooperation of institutions is. Colleagues, you heard this wide sort of review where we mentioned several items. It's a joint, it's similar issues, joint space. We can learn from each other. There is a potential for using the data in the representative analysis. There is an argument that countries are of one region, and we can reasonably easy find experts and exchange opinions. We made a suggestion on joint studies to look at comparisons, and we raised an issue of importance of this approach, because all the independent organizations here that for civil organizations to provide an opportunity to speak out. So not some smart people from afar like me come and talk on behalf of the other region, but for the region to talk on behalf of itself. But it's another issue. So during last month, two big guidebooks were published, but mainly they're people from the West or people from the region but who are working at the West were published. But the number of the researchers is growing bigger from the region. So we see that this idea for a region speaking out is important, and it's a good perspective for the future. Now I would like to open up a discussion and invite people here and also Zoom colleagues to actively participate in discussion. If you're in Zoom, can you please note, I have a comment, I have a question, and my assistants will send it to a wonderful device. And with that, I will know that I can connect this discussions all together. So we talked about abstract things and we talked about the present, and I would like to direct your attention to the future and to a practical sphere. So what can really be done by the means we have available using our resources, not leaning on a colossal sort of investments from side, which platforms we can strengthen in order to strengthen this exchange and promote exchange of research organizations in the region towards the direction we desire. That's a big and complex question. I give you 2 seconds, 2 minutes to digest. Turn on the mic, a quick answer. In principle, if we talk about cooperation based on the existing resources and capabilities, I think that we should take into consideration the following limitations, which impose certain difficulties onto such organization or work, is the necessity to stick to the existing framework of studies. For study to be accepted, to have a scientific basis, it's necessary to apply a justified methodology of selection and interview or questionnaire development and other things which has to do with the terminology and so on. But if we put this aside and say that we can do that, I think we can choose. So it's very important to resolve, the legal sort of environment, environmental agenda, small and medium-sized entrepreneurship development, female rights, the subjects which are joint for are the same for everybody, uniform for everybody, and concentrating on them, we can actually perform monitoring on the situation on such an areas as I mentioned. And to perform studies, you can perform studies on the phone, online. We can create a panel working group in order to decrease the expenses for these studies. So results can be processed online. They can be published at some free platforms which allow not to simply provide the results, but also to work with this data. Like it has like a screen which allows you to process the data, Google Data Studio, which can be adjusted to work with the data. I think that if you want and you want to do this, you can find the options which will work from one side. So to create such a cooperation, but should not compromise the participants of the study as violators of scientific basis of research management. Thank you very much, Shamon. So I have 4 hands. So first Nurgul, then Anna, then Serik, and there is Victor, who wrote 2 questions in the chat box. Thank you very much. I think meeting here, we should pay attention to how we can cooperate using the existing resources among the ones mentioned. First of all, okay, so the academic research centers that have a great experience on the methodology of the research. You have a great number of publications which are not always promoted. So I think that if we get to discuss and make profitable cooperation for everybody. First one is for civil society. It would be good for us if you could join to the same process, for example, to improve the research process. I mean, in technical issues. So for you, the benefit would be that the civil sector can become a driver of recommendations, innovations on the results which you gathered. It's inexpensive, it's efficient, it's profitable. So I like how Bobur said this cheap, like this cheap approach, you know. Anna, if you don't mind, you can start. Based on our experience, Paper Lab is based on Astana, and we work for about 5 years, and together with the framework of the joint research with Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan. What is important is this experience demonstrates that the result received is much richer, brings more nuances and optics which we oversee during our studies within one country. So I think that is important. So we position ourselves as a Central Asian think tank, and this identity is very important. For researchers, do not affiliate their understanding of the issue with the boundaries of their country, which still dominates. And this peculiarity of political systems which were created, because think tanks were created within the sphere of the state organizations. Now, but now they're becoming the members of the civil society. They are not tied. They do not have ties like this, so they can freely develop the cooperation. And the second thing is we have a discussion platform Paper Lab, and we have organized several discussions on general sort of issues, and we see a great potential. And it's not expensive, just together in Zoom and discuss something important, and then promote it through the social media. And also it's important to learn and to teach. We have 2 projects where upon our initiative, we train young researchers how to research. And now we have a new wave of researchers thanks to the Nazarbayev University in Kyrgyzstan and other universities. So we see that the graduates, they want to work in the independent sector, but unfortunately there are not a lot of sort of proposals to work. So we train them, we grow them, and we see the results. I think that this is a very prospective area for all research centers. I would like to add, and so we can actually close this sort of subject matter. So there was a very good idea. So thanks to the Association of Civil Society, ARGO, during the recent years, they've developed strong resources and a platform, and we can utilize this if we talk about cheap means or approaches. So we should build the bridges between institutions, systems, regions. And yes, we do have methodologies. We can concur them and create some kind of a joint sort of effort and just to make measurements for the civil society. We can call them experts so they can compile like a top list, list of top questions, which periodically will be revised, and we can use them as annual, first every quarter, then annual factual sheets collection. Maybe it will be multimedia news system with the research accent.
And by doing that, we'll be building it up. And if we go back to the Soviet time, when we had this all Russian Center of Public Opinion Research, and they had representative offices everywhere, and those were centers for public opinion research. And they conducted this panel studies back in the Soviet times, which were conducted on a regular basis. They looked at the unemployment rates and other parameters, and all that was assessed, discussed, and used. And I think that we are moving towards that, and we're going to start as soon as we see this capacity, and we're going to start using the civil society, because it is the civil society that will demonstrate the areas that today cause some concern, so that we have lack information on which we couldn't reach. I would also like to echo on the need to develop a hub that is being created as part of the this project, Innovation for Change, Argo, because it is in demand. And it is important for all of us, this way or the other, to take an effort to fill it up with content, because we have a lot of analytical materials that are being developed, and we can just discuss how once a quarter, maybe send it to the Innovation for Change Hub, send materials and updates and so on and so forth. And I think it is important, and we have to provide content about the resources that are available, because we know them, we use them, we like them. And another thing is that discussion platforms. We need them, and we have to create discussion platforms, theme-based discussion platforms, and provide data to some content centers, decide which organization could act as a pulsar on a certain subject. For example, once a month or once a quarter. And I think we can determine that, and we can decide on technical and thematical discussions. We're going to have the discussion platforms where we will determine best practices in the region, have discussions and identify challenges, etc., etc. And these platforms would allow us to form a joint position, especially prior to some large international events, so that the voice of Central Asia, the voice of the civil society of Central Asia, could be heard. And it is not heard pretty much, and we could move this forward to make sure that we are heard together. So if, just to sum up what you just said, what I heard before, in this part of the discussion, what I heard was 3 or 4 main things. One is the question of methodology and training, and this methodology and the application of high quality and documented good methods, study methods, research methods. And another one is the exchange between organizations in order to qualify and quantify, especially civil society organizations, so that they could be capable of doing this. And I was really happy to hear that such formats are already used, and they could be developed further. And I think that I would agree probably with Nurgul that yes, we have great capacity for development here. Another one is the use of technical platforms that already exist. That could be platforms for visualization of data, and platforms of informational exchange that exist today. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel here. We already have a lot of resources that are available to us. And the third issue is subjects. and topics that we will choose for our research activities. This should be topics that affect us directly. So if we talk about the civil society, one of the most important subjects for research of civil society is the status of the civil society itself. And here I see everyone's nodding, and it's really hard to disagree with that. Here, in about half an hour, a colleague from Afghanistan will share his experience of creating such an analytical instrument called Index of Innovations of Civil Society Organizations, where an organization can analyze itself and use it check marks to see where their innovation potential is. And the instrument is at the very beginning of its development phase, but instruments like that are easy to create, and they provide civil society with great opportunities to continue work as a subject of study. And the fourth one is to activate the actual work. So it doesn't happen per se. We need a driver, we need an organization or organizations that hub could become a platform. It's not a problem. And I really like the idea that we have to collect information about what's going on, to hold regular meetings, forums. That doesn't take much time. The only expense there is your time and our time, and everything is possible, everything is doable. It's very simple to implement, but it has a very high potential for development. Did I miss something? Nurgul. Camilla, Victor, I remember your questions. We'll get back to those a little later. Thank you. Thank you very much. You're right for the most part. One small comment when I was talking about joint partnership, and in essence, I was talking about the dialogue about mutual partnership, not only just between research centers, but between research academic centers and local civil organizations, such as Krusheta did and Larissa, represented by Larissa, that are not highly experienced, but could become drivers in providing recommendations. So for me, it is important to notice and to know the existing fantastic resources, so that we could use them for the benefit, not just between themselves, but with the local organizations that lack experience, but could become excellent drivers of change, of the favorable and enabling environment, improving that enabling environment. And these two aspects, this would be mutually beneficial. Thank you for your very important addition. Let me move back to the questions that I received in the chat from the participants online. Somebody dropped the mic. One question. I would like to know what projects of research nature we can finance, and which areas they should be in. That's a very interesting question, because it is very relevant. It's very accurate, and it's a lively question among the civil society that's looking for sources of funding. And here we have to, I don't know, maybe you would like to answer this. And on my behalf, I can just say that as an organization, we are not and we don't have the objective to finance the research. Our objective is to develop cooperation between different research organizations. And if we can attract some small funding, then that would be projects that would deepen, strengthen, and develop cooperation in the region, cooperation between research organizations and civil organizations, and building capacity. And the question that I wanted to raise to the audience from Kamila Razieva, the human rights activist in Kyrgyzstan, if you could comment on the possibility of conducting joint research in Central Asia and the use of results, including on development of the civil society and its cooperation with or partnership with the government. And so we're talking about the civil society, the cooperation between the civil society and the government. What is the capacity and the potential there? How can it be developed? Nurgul, over to you. I think that it's an excellent question because it is about the future of the think tank, the Kindu think tank, and I think that I hope that we plan to hold some activities and there we can together decide on regional, whether the regional research is needed and what kind of regional research. And it would be good if you could participate during these discussions to propose your activities. So during lunch, we had a discussion among the environmentalists, the possible impact as part of the environmental aspects. And there's a whole range of those. So with regards to funding, I think that we have to actively look for those, but what I've seen, I've been witnessing processes when the civil sector of Central Asia doesn't submit any applications for research because and those are applications not for research organization or companies, but for local organizations. For example, recently, Kaishan, remember we had a discussion and several times there were CPD, that's a civil society platform. There were publications in Central Asia, and they're usually published globally to see how external assistance for research and the impact of external assistance and involvement of civil society. For example, unfortunately, there are very few applications. There will be other sources. You have to look for them. And you have to create or invent the spoon to be able to eat, but we have to know what we want and will do. I think funding is not a priority issue. We have to first decide what we want to change, how we want to change it, see who our potential partners are. And a lot of our colleagues, when we worked with our colleagues, we didn't have a list or a database of people who we could address to asking for help, but now we know who we can address and ask for help. Just a few common words from me. Ideally, the implementation of research in the civil society is the best thing, as far as I know, and we just conducted a research together with Octade, and as far as I know, it is conducted both in Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan. It's either conducted or has been already completed, but it's not important. What's important is that in participation, preparedness of the civil society to participate in such research is very high. They're open for participation and its organizations. The question here is, who do we believe are representatives of the civil society? It's a methodological question for the most part, because based on some data, everything that's between the state authorities and government and the public is considered to be part of the civil sector. So we have to figure out who exactly we mean and what we talk about, and then act. And I think in principle, this does not require any money, because we can come up with a questionnaire online and have quarterly, for example, and Khurjada's presentation is very informative, useful, and it gives a possibility for us gives us a possibility to communicate with state authorities. That's a great example, and we should adhere to it. There was a question from Zelina, the user, from the participant, who was asking, where do we look for finances? Yes, we have to track tenders. You have to have a system in place for tracking those tenders. So maybe our hub should be the point of contact where we could post such information and materials, because then we could use this for the regional research. Yes, and that as well. But usually for example, we have a department that collects information and they sort it, and after that we make a decision whether to apply for this funding or not, for this project or not. But there are specialized sites, for example, UNTJ in Tajikistan. It's UNOTJ, I think, and where we publish information, and so we collect this information on tenders in one spot. Nurgul, your title is. I would like to share not just information, but call upon you to OECD that gives money to our countries, which all of our countries access, and we receive external assistance. I think they have a special division, which is called Strengthening Enabling Environment for the Civil Society. On the 6th of July, they made a recommendation as to what to do next. And this is where one of the recommendations is about funding of the civil society. And we spent several years trying to, we is a spectrum of organizations with a lot of active organizations. And I also am part of it, but they do a lot of work, put a lot of effort into getting the core funding, not for small projects, but for activities of an organization that could decide where to use this money. And research is there as well. So with that regards, we shouldn't wait for ready solutions of funding solutions, but looking for sources. The SDG, for example, says for sustainable development, we have to mobilize internal resources. The civil sector is not involved, very little involved. It's not often that we propose our own solutions as to how to get this money. So that's why we can look from the existing sources, but also contribute to creation of new sources. Thank you. There was another question from the virtual room, from Zoom. In this case, Nicole Beccarationi is asking, will you create a Central Asian depositorium of all this research that's conducted in the region? And this is, I see everyone's nodding, and I'm a little cautious about this because it's a colossal task, and there's a lot that has to be done here, but a depositorium of our own research would be nice, and that would be very helpful. I don't know, do you have any other comments before maybe? Yes, I mentioned in my presentation during the previous session that we're launching in Uzbekistan an electronic catalog of all the results of research of think tanks. And I think this is what we should strive for, but the regional catalog is only possible when all countries have similar catalogs. So this is what our objective should be. And moreover, we should find the strength to translate and actually find the possibility to translate these results to other languages so that we're heard, which is very important. We should strive for that. Thank you. Thank you. Our discussion is slowly running to an end. So we have about 5 minutes left. And now I would like to get into the practical plane and find out from each of you one action that you would recommend be implemented in the next 3 or 6 months to strengthen this regional exchange. And once again, a few moments for to think it over. I can give you several seconds each, but I see that somebody's already ready with the answer. Over to you, Babur. It's not a ready answer, but I think that we have to start with something. And my colleague, Pertunat, was saying that we have to identify ourselves as a regional think tank. And for that, as I already said in my presentation, we have to have some kind of a flag or a motto and some ideology to adhere to. So we have to be under a Central Asian think tank network or whatever. And that's how it should be called, I think. And then we should start with simple actions, such as here we have think tanks sitting here. We have to adopt a resolution, maybe send a memorandum amongst ourselves, first of all, and then develop. For example, we can, with Uzbekistan, we can invite 10 think tanks from Uzbekistan. You can, everyone here can invite several think tanks. Then we have to create some kind of network where we'll be talking, and be that in Telegram channel, WhatsApp channel, whatever, or WhatsApp group. We have to start with something. Then we have to conduct and help each other to conduct activities. For example, Yuksalish can organize a presentation of your research. If that has part of it is about Uzbekistan, we can invite audience, respected audience, including people, decision makers, parliamentaries, members of parliaments, ministry, representatives from ministries and agencies, and we can do that. And everyone here could make their own contribution. I think that if we start with something and then move on to actions, then we'll succeed. Thank you. Thank you. I would like to briefly interrupt you. We have about 4 minutes. So please be very concise in your recommendations. Our organization, the Ecological Movement, CIOM, is ready to conduct a regional discussion on involvement of the civil sector in civil society in preparation of national determined contributions to the Paris Agreement within the context of climate change. So this activities like that, we are ready to conduct those. Great.
So first of all, I'm grateful that everyone participating here agrees that regional, interregional cooperation is very much needed, and maybe it's too late for us to start, right? And we are all discussing it for a certain amount of time. And what we need to do, there's very many things that we can start with, but in order to start, we need to commit and act. I think so, and I really agree with Bobur and what he's saying about starting with the small things, right? Because waiting for someone or some organization to build that platform for us to exchange, we might be waiting for another decade. So anyone from within ourselves can start and commit and moving together, and that's the leadership that we can show.
Спасибо.
I think what Anna proposed, just at least we should agree that at least once a month or once 2 months, but 1 quarter. So 1 quarter is not enough, but once a month we can organize some Zoom meetings with certain agenda. We can plan, even these dates we can plan. If we agree to Zoom meetings, we can agree that at this Zoom meeting will be a presentation of some research and then some master classes or exchange of experience on application of new methods. So then this platform can exist based on such monthly activity, and then something else will come out. So colleagues already said everything, you know, but I would also suggest another study on the joint subject, including Mongolia, in terms of changing nature of activity. It's a very important subject. We can see that the civil activity has changed significantly thanks to the sort of digital area changes, and it's quite clear for the civil society, but we lack researchers who would be able to study this, measure this, and explain this, because there are a lot of myths and fears on behalf of the state agencies who do not know how to regulate this activity, how to press, press it with the money levers. So that is why we need to study all the myths around this subject. It would be very useful. I have 3 exact proposals. First, for academic official centers, we define which sort of support we can provide for the local organizations to increase the potential. Also, as Bobur was saying, in Uzbekistan, to create the database of experts, not only on the research processes, so think tank can use you, can refer to you. And the third thing would be wonderful if you have any money, remember sources or resources. No, I'm not looking at Bobur. I'm looking at our participants. If you have any money, if it's possible to involve local civil society organizations like Khurshid, Larisa to run the studies, that would be very useful, beneficial for everybody. Thank you. So if we create this network once a year, we have a possibility to invite 100 representatives to Tashkent for 2 days and just communicate. I love it when there is just the file-defined proposal. Thank you. There was a comment from the room or from Zoom. There are a lot of different platforms in Central Asia. The most important thing is for them to be working, to be operational. So it's important to create a working instrument. With that, I would like to wrap up the session, and the last word will be from me to all of you. Come to our working group on think tank development. There are 2 of you there, and there will be more people. Thank you. All information will be provided. I'm staying here, and I would like to invite my charming colleague, Olga. Dear friends, we have a half an hour break. Those of you who are in the social networks, so we'll come back in 30 minutes. Our Zoom participants, you have time for coffee, tea, and rest in half an hour. Please get back. We will continue. It's very important. Thank you.
Спасибо вам большое за активное участие и за внимание.